Natalie, can you say something real quick?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We certainly can. In fact, I'm going to turn you down just a little.
Okay, thanks.
Only one in the state of Missouri and one of only 6 schools nationwide. "517 schools on the Alliance for a Healthier Generations 2020 list of America's healthiest schools. Along with acknowledging the schools, we would also like to recognize Leanne White, who serves as the project director for the district's health and fitness grants, for her longtime work on this effort. Congratulations to all. We have several sets of minutes for approval. The first is August 11th. So I move that we accept the business minute, I'm sorry, the feedback here is difficult. I move that we accept the minutes for the August 11th, 2020 regular business meeting. Is there a second? Second. Questions or discussion? Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
I'll abstain. I was not there.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell? Ms. Vowell? Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I move that we accept the minutes from August 25th, 2020 work session. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I move that we accept the minutes from the September 8th, 2020 regular business meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I move that we accept the minutes from the September 22nd work session. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
So typically, this would be our public comment section. The Board of Education of the City of St. Louis does value the opinions of the St. Louis community. We ask that you be respectful and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. While we are committed to receiving public comments during the COVID-19 pandemic and the corresponding suspension of in-person public Board of Education meetings, as part of this effort, the board is inviting interested members of the public to submit written comments to the following email address prior to the start of the board meeting: slpsinfo@slps.org. Subject to the requirements that commenters exercise proper decorum and respect for individual student or employee privacy, the Board of Education will assemble the written comments and make them available for review by the public via a link that will be placed on the district website alongside the link for viewing rebroadcasts of this board meeting. This procedure for submitting public comments will remain in effect until the Board of Education returns to their normal in-person public meeting format. With that said, Dr. Adams, I will turn this over to you.
Good afternoon to the board and to the public. First and foremost, Mrs. Vanoy, you want to bring up the presentation from Mrs. Pierce. Good evening. First off, I'd like to recognize 2 students from Metro High School who have earned perfect scores on the ACT. Just 0.195% of all test takers earned 36, a perfect score. Congratulations to these seniors, their teachers, and families, Locke, Meyer, and McLean Kelly. Congratulations to those 2 students. The most recent test date was October the 6th. So if we learn of any additional 36ers, we will be sure to share that news at the upcoming meeting. I also want to encourage our middle school families to participate in a fun, informative event coming up this Thursday from 1:30 until 2:30. All 7th and 8th graders, along with their parents and guardians, are invited and encouraged to attend the High School Here I Come virtual event. Families will learn about all of our high school options and have the opportunity to win prizes. The event will be on the district's YouTube channel, St. Louis Public Schools. Finally, tomorrow, our support staff team is holding an online workshop providing tips for families transitioning back to in-person learning. Registration is closed, but the session will be posted on our website if they have not already signed up. Those are the updates at this point in time. I have one additional update. If you can look at the screen, you can see the 2 students that I just alluded to, as well as the high school Here I Come event that is scheduled again for Thursday from 1:30 until 2:30. There are several presentations tonight. We will start with the financial update from Mrs. Angie Banks, followed by the assessment, STAR assessment from Dr. Knight and Mrs. Vanoy, who I believe are both tag teaming this particular presentation. Mrs. Banks.
Well, good evening, everyone. This will be the update for the September financials. Of course, you know our financial objectives and our agenda. September is preliminary and August is final. So for our COVID update, we have submitted all the documentation for the Access Grant, the $284,000, and anticipate receiving payment any day. We've had consultations with the non-public schools for the 2 grants, the student electronic devices and the transportation grant. We will likely not be receiving the supply reimbursement grant as the city does not have enough funds and there is a 75% match requirement. Not much to update here, but on October 7th, the state did announce additional CARES revenue, $61.5 million for K-12 schools on a per pupil basis. We have not received any further documentation yet, but we anticipate that we should receive something later this month. Here's our CARES spending. It has not really changed since last month. We have spent approximately $1 million or 9% of our allocation on PPE, sanitation, and extra service. We're really contemplating on how to spend the additional funds through September 2022 and leveraging all our different funding sources to make sure we make the best choices. This is the FY 2020 revenue and expenditure preliminary update by fund. Next month, we should be really close to final. We should have a good final draft, if you will, as we get closer and closer to the audit's conclusion. Here it is in graphical form. And again, here's the adopted fiscal year 2021 budget, revenues by fund category and source, and expenditures by fund category and object. There really have been no major changes in September other than it closed out the quarter. Things usually start to ramp up in October. So this is the same as what you saw last month. So here's the first quarter for fiscal year 21 revenues for all funds. You can see that we received approximately $7.4 million in September revenue. You can see that in red, $13.4 million year to date, or 3.4% of the revenue budget. The increase in revenues in December are due primarily to delinquent property taxes and sales taxes that we received for the fiscal year beginning in September. You can see that the graphic on the bottom, not a whole lot of movement with the actuals in blue. Here are the first quarter expenditures for all funds. Again, in September, in red, you can see that we spent $31.8 million in September, $44 million year to date, or 11% of the expenditure budget. The large expenditure increase in September really reflects the 2 full payrolls for all staff that have returned in the schools and throughout central office. And on the graphic below, you can really start to see the expenditures starting to pick up, mostly in local, and of course, the total, you can really see that 11%. Our financial outlook, of course, we're all preparing for school restart. We are providing individual PPE kits for all school staff, and of course, more custodial support. We were surprised by the state additional revenue. Typically, we were looking for a restriction, so that indeed was an unknown. That really concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions that you may have.
I have a couple of questions. One is on the revenue. It seems like we are receiving revenue at a much slower pace than what we're spending. Can you maybe explain that and how we accommodate for that difference between revenue we get versus the spending we get?
Yes. For revenues, particularly with the general operating budget, which the largest source is property taxes, and we just went through the tax levy process. So the taxes based on the tax levy are due, and everyone would receive their notices generally in November. The taxes are due in December, and we receive probably 90+% of the property tax revenue in December and January. Of course, we are spending throughout the year. So there's a big difference in when we receive that those big revenues. And from a federal and food service, those fund categories, those grants, those are reimbursement based. So we spend the money first and then we request payment. So we've been able to use the fund balance as working capital until we receive the revenues without having to take out loans as in tax anticipation notes.
Thank you for that. You answered all those questions. I have one other question. Is it possible for us to use the PPE funds for other purposes than when that are planned right now? And in particular, I was just wondering, is there a way to use PPE funds to expand the Wi-Fi reach or bandwidth in the schools?
Yes, there are lots of opportunities to use those CARES dollars in which any type of relating to students having better access. We right now participate in the E-rate program. So we have used them in the past and we only pay about 10% of the cost as E-rate picks up the majority.
Thank you.
Ms. Banks, can you speak a little bit more to what you said about the city not being able to reimburse us at the rate we expected? Was that what you said?
Are you speaking about the
CARES.
grant, the
The
75% match?
Yes.
Yes. So based on, all the different types of grants through the CARES, they have different requirements. And the supply reimbursement grant has a 75% match, which means that the city would have to pay 75% of the cost of whatever we were purchasing. So we pay 25% and the city's match would be the 75%. Unfortunately, the city received their allocation before this grant was announced. And I believe they spent those funds before they knew of the match requirements.
So just from our understanding, so that means that those dollars we will not use, or we've spent them and we just can't get reimbursed for them.
No, we have not spent them.
And so we will not spend
Yeah,
them.
we will not spend those.
And how much is that? Or would that be?
I'm not sure if there's an allocation.
Because
It
we
would have
haven't seen
depended on what the city had available in a match, and then we could determine how much we could spend.
Okay.
If there are no other questions at this time, thank you, Mrs. Banks.
Thank you.
Dr. Knight?
Good evening. So tonight, Ms. Van Noy and I will give you an update on the first quarter student performance on STAR. Throughout this presentation, we will provide you an update in terms of how students fared pre-COVID as well as post-COVID, remind you of the instructional priorities that we've identified for 2021, as well as the action steps that we will continue to take to ensure that there is continuous and sustainable improvement over time. So just to put this in context, when we're talking about reading and COVID, what we do know about the pandemic is that there was significant instructional loss over time. However, according to NWEA, which is the Northwest Evaluation Assessment System, they are the leading researchers around what has been happening across this nation as it relates to student performance. So what they did was they created a collaborative white paper for districts to use to really identify what's happening, what we should concentrate on as a district to ensure the instructional loss is regained while kids are in school. So what you will see is that even though we have experienced some instructional loss because of COVID, because of the summer months, the extended school closure, the instructional loss is not as significant as we initially thought based on the grade equivalencies, which is what you'll see with Ms. Van Nooy's update. So how do we ensure the continuous teaching and learning continues and takes place while we're either virtual, hybrid, or brick and mortar? So I just wanted to remind us of the 3 priorities for this school year 2021: fidelity to the instructional core, ensuring that we are providing teachers all of the support that they need as it relates to weekly booster sessions, dropping into classrooms, and giving continuous feedback. The Tier 2 support, small group instruction, which seems to be working quite well, where teachers do have that opportunity to have that small group instruction, even though it is online. And when we talk about assessments, formative assessments, those quick assessments, asking the quick questions, and then having the progress monitoring over time. And so as long as we stick to these 3 priorities, and not just exclusively to these 3, but these are our 3 main priorities, we will continue to see that continuous and sustainable student improvement over time. So these next 3 slides will really demonstrate how our kids actually performed on STAR pre-COVID and where we are today.
Thank you, Dr. Knight. Before we talk about the STAR actual data, I wanted to give you a background on the STAR assessment. We typically give it 3 times a year: August, December, and then in April. So in 2019-20, we were able to give the STAR data in August and December, but because of COVID-19, the April assessment was not able to be given. However, in September of 2020, all students in K-8 took the STAR assessment actually at home. The majority of the students took the assessment during the synchronous learning time that we have talked about in previous meetings. The assessment office analyzed the STAR data for validity since students did not take the assessment in school. The assessment companies have provided guidance around virtual testing practices to ensure continued testing integrity. Students will take the assessment again in December and again in April of 21. We will continue to determine growth in the grade level equivalency in both months. We also use the April STAR to determine summer school placement. The slide on the screen right now shows a progression of students from the fall of 2019 to the fall of 2020. 2020. When you look at the chart last year, kindergartners started the year at 0.35 grade level equivalency. And when the same students took the STAR assessment in December, their scores rose to 1.2. 1.2 means first grade, second month. That was in December. And as first graders this year, in 2021 school year, they scored 2.65, which is second grade, 6th month, almost 7th month. This is a direct match of the students from kindergarten to first, and the next one is first grade to second grade, and so on. We had pretty significant participation even with the virtual assessment, and from 2nd to 8th grade, the participation rate ranged from 75.2 to as high as 88.4. This screen outlines the same data starting with 4th grade up to 8th grade. And this pie chart shows the breakdown of the 4 levels that STAR provides: at or above grade level, approaching, intervention, or urgent intervention. We are looking at the ranges so that we can tailor specific supports to each student. Our interventions, our professional development, and coaching cycles supports teachers to provide targeted instructions to students who are in that intervention and urgent intervention category. For our students in the urgent and intervention categories, we provide specific support throughout the year, such as leveled literacy intervention, you've heard us use LLI, and other evidence-based interventions. We focus on third grade students due to Senate Bill 319, which calls for the early assessment of students' reading skills and requires school districts to intervene with students who are reading at below grade level. The law requires assessments of students in grades 3 through 6 with some small exceptions to determine their reading level, individualized reading improvement plans for students in grades 4 through 6 who are substantially below grade level in reading. It also indicates retention of students in grade 4 if they are reading below the third grade level. I will now hand it back to Dr. Knight to talk about our action steps.
So this slide just reiterates our core priorities for 2021. As I said, fidelity to the instructional framework, individualized learning assessments, assignments for students, and ensuring that there's that independent work time, instructional videos, recorded lessons that our families as well as students will have access to and will continue to have access to. Weekly booster sessions. Just this week, we have a booster session, multiple scheduled for every day this week except Friday. The tier 2 support, ensuring that we are creating those small group instruction for kids, as well as the assessments for learning and ensuring that teachers are able to set goals for students. And so next steps. And so what I will say is this is the time of the year where we start planning for summer. Even though it does seem early, this is when we begin to have that forward thinking around what worked last summer and some of our lessons learned. And so to begin the conversation around what do we need to do as it relates to summer planning, you may recall this past summer, we had 3 summer sessions. Session 1, we had approximately 900 students. That was our credit recovery. For session 2, we had approximately 2,500 children who were enrolled. And then for session 3, we had just under 500. So looking at summer session and how we plan summer a different way, as opposed to the way that we've always done it in years past. Utilizing teacher-made assessments, providing that support to classroom teachers to create those teacher-made assessments, and to continue to provide the continuous professional development with descriptive feedback and immediate feedback to classroom teachers as we're making these classroom observations. And so that ends our update around first quarter reading. I will certainly take any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Dr. Knight and Ms. Benoit. Could you share a little about how this data from this year compared to a typical school year as far as the gains that we are seeing in the STAR reading scores?
Yeah, we were pleasantly surprised that it was very similar to a regular school year. We looked for specific areas that might have been a concern with being virtual assessment compared to in-person assessment. And we didn't see any huge anomalies between last year and this year. So as Dr. Knight indicated, all the summer work that we did do, I think impacted the learning loss to not be as high as what we were anticipating.
So typically in a non-COVID school year, students, we do see some gains from the winter then to the fall, like I guess I'm thinking in a typical year, we normally expect to see some summer slide, and it doesn't seem that happened here.
We typically do see larger gains in first through third grade. And then when you look at the higher grade levels, the gains are not as high. Students are still below grade level in some of the upper grades, but you do still see growth.
And these scores are, you said it was about approximately 75 to 90% of students, the scores are reflected in this data here.
So everyone everyone participated, but this represents those who had a score last year compared to this year. And those are the participation that I discussed, as high as 88.4. So a student that wasn't enrolled with us last year wouldn't be in these numbers because we didn't have anything to compare to.
Sure. Thank you.
I have a question, please. So your data, does it includes the virtual learning from this year, this past summer?
Correct.
Okay, so can you determine whether or not the virtual learning has had a large effect upon the student as compared to last year? The gains look really good. And so will you be utilizing virtual more next summer as a result of that?
I'm sure we'll be discussing that. I don't know that one session of this would give us the validity to say that we should only do virtual assessments, but it would be certainly something that we could look at, as Dr. Knight indicated. This was the first year that we had 3 different sessions of summer school. So I'm sure that really had a specific impact on all of that.
I have a quick question. It's nice to see the growth, but as you indicated in the higher grades, students seem to still be reading at much lower levels than probably they should. Do you guys have you guys set, numerical goals on where you want these upper students, where you want them to be, what level rating levels you want them to be, and what time frame do you have to increase those reading levels?
Sure, thank you for asking that. So we set targets at the beginning of the year, but what we do is we identify it by range. So if you are an 8th grader, and we want these gains to be significant, but we want them to also be, we want it to be very clear. So if you are reading at a 4th grade level, we set those targets based on where you are and the projection in terms of where we want you to be by the end of the year. So that's why we have STAR 3 times a year, at the beginning of the year, which sets the baseline, middle of the year, which is where you should be by this point in time. And then that lets us know where we need to intervene and have some more stronger progress monitoring by mid-year. So we do set those targets and we are looking at that. That's why that progress monitoring is so important.
And you guys, as you continue to report, you'll report on those specific gains
Yes,
by the ranges?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
ma'am.
With teachers having to support students with different ranges, especially around reading levels, what strategies is the district employing? Is there a rearrangement of classrooms after STAR data comes out to make sure that students who are at similar levels get the same support and progress the same? Are they mixed? What are the strategies there?
So teachers, we implement a few different strategies, Mr. Lane. One is based on where kids are. So there are opportunities where if you have a 4th grader who may be reading on a 5th grade level, that may be reading above level, giving them an opportunity to work with some other 5th grade students. There are the small group instruction. So when we have kids who are below range, who are significantly below range, where we are working with them much more intensely. We have the LLI, the level literacy intervention structure, where we are spending much more time with them. What we call the tier two instruction, where we have much more minutes built into the day. So if a kid is reading above level, we do give them that opportunity to work with other children who are on their level so that they can so that they can continue and maintain that level of reading as well as those skills. So they do have an opportunity to interface with other kids.
And is this the case for all grade levels, or is this only the case for the levels at which we do the STAR test?
So it's primarily at K-8, but let me back up. It's mainly at K-5. I don't want to necessarily say that this is what we're doing 6, 7, and 8, but I will say at the middle school level for sure.
Thank you, ladies. Good afternoon. I'd like to start the Looking at the numbers from last year to this year, the numbers in red are the numbers from last year. The numbers in black are the numbers from this year at the same time, so you get some comparison here. The number of teachers hired, 167 compared to 239 last year. The number of teachers and Teacher for America, 11 compared to 22. Total hires are down almost 100 from last year to this time. Number of teachers who resigned, at last year the numbers were higher than they are now. The number of teachers who are retired, some 3 to 4-fold, 19 compared to 6. The numbers are small, but still teachers are still retiring as we continue to go through the year. The number of terminations, 0, same as last year. The number of teachers separated by death, 1 compared to 0 last year, and total separations, 59 compared to 47. That is as of the same time last year. October 5th, indicating the number of teacher vacancies, number of non-cert teaching vacancies, administrative vacancies, for a total of about 192 vacancies at this time, compared to about 117 from last year. And the date last year was about September the 5th. This is even 1 month further into the year. In terms of the vacancies, looking at the number of vacancies compared to about the same time last year, at least the positions that are vacant, a larger number of math teachers, a larger number of science teachers, a larger number of special education teachers, music teachers as well, and obviously PE teachers. The numbers are much larger than they were last year this time, and you can see the critical areas that the district still has at this time. The number of ADA requests, obviously the virus has really triggered a number of persons asking for ADA requests. Certification challenges as well, as you can see, some 231. One was compared from July 1st to 2020. The numbers last year was for the entire year. So for the entire year last year, the number of ADA requests were 125. Just so far this year, from July 1st to October 5th, the number is much higher than it would have been for the entire year last year. The family medical leaves, as you can see, in red, what those leaves are for. Obviously, with the COVID-related reasons, 100 leaves compared to the numbers that compared to what we would have had last year without COVID. Child care leaves increased as well. Those two specific leaves were covered by the CARES Act, and so persons could apply for these leaves as a result of the CARES Act. But you can see the numbers going all the way down. But obviously, because of the virus this year, those numbers are much larger than they've ever been. Labor management, this really doesn't represent anything other than the fact that as of the beginning of the school year, the small number of grievances and those kinds of things, obviously persons are not in place in buildings, so obviously there are less claims that will be filed relative to grievances and those kinds of things. Labor management issues as well, as labor, quite frankly, is not in one of our buildings. They're in their homes providing the kind of instruction that students need. Lastly, number of days in operation. Well, let me switch to the General Call Center. 26 days we operated compared to 10 last year. We have about 1,800 calls compared to about 5,000 calls last year. You can see that the call center explanations, transportation calls, enrollment, human resources, and student recruitment and placement. Last board meeting, the board asked for some breakdown. I think I provided that to the board, but I'm providing it to you again to see what the breakdown was in terms of enrollment. Instructional support technology was the largest request, and also any miscellaneous. Virtual school enrollment, giving you a weekly account up until September the 30th, which is the day that the state recognizes our numbers, and we get paid for that number that's reported on September the 30th. You can see the elementary numbers week to week, middle school numbers week to week, high school numbers week to week, and the total numbers. Should be noted that the elementary numbers compared to last year are lower. The middle and high school numbers are pretty much where they were. It's the early childhood environment that is less 700 students, or some 600 or 700 students compared to last year. Nationally across the country, I read a report today that about 5 to 6% of the enrollment across the country, and in similar districts as ours, is much smaller, and that number is calculated mainly at the elementary level, pre-K through grades 2. The numbers for alternative sites as well, elementary and middle, our Edmendum program, which is our online program, 172 at the high school level, and some 241 in our alternative programs. And that would be Fresh Start and those kind of programs, similar to the programs that are at ICA as well, the Blewett site. Equipment's still out. You can see what the numbers are. On 10-2, that number was about 1,000 iPads still outstanding. Hotspots about 640. And you can see about 912 of the students of the 1,056 are active. Some of those students have left the district, left the region, left the state. About 144 are inactive. Our security team is working with the St. Louis Police Department as we track down equipment and track down students. And they have been collecting and picking up equipment on a regular basis. And so this number on 10-2 is much smaller than it, I'm not gonna say much smaller, it's smaller than what's represented here because they got engaged around September the 30th. So they were only engaged for about 3 days into the reporting of this data. Distribution, about 82% of iPads have been distributed. Laptops, about 74%. Hotspots, we ordered an additional 2,000 hotspots. And at this point in time, I think we've kind of deployed all of the hotspots based on families coming back and getting hotspots and hotspots being broken. But we received additional 2,000 additional hotspots for a total of about 6,000 hotspots totally. About 105 families have opted out. They have their own technology, and about 242 have supplied their own equipment. Food service, you can see that the rates are much smaller than they were this time last year, obviously because we're virtual. 12% breakfasts, lunches 9%, with total meals about 69,396 meals compared to about 99,000 last year. But this is us giving food for multiple days. Transportation, won't spend a lot of time here other than to indicate that we're running about 155 routes compared to about 276 routes last year this time. The eligible population were the students who were targeted for the instructional support center, some 2,200 students compared to about 17,000 students that we normally would transport. Call center numbers are obviously lower than they were last year this time, but you can see what the information is based on the call center. That number is going to uptick based on our recommendation for in-person that starts next week. Questions that the board might have relative to this presentation? This is just a final back to school update. There's a second one I'm doing on a restart, but any kind of questions that the board might have relative to this presentation.
Could you go back to the slide on vacancies? So my question is, do the vacancies include people who are on leave?
It does not. No, it does not.
So I guess my question is, what is the impact on the vacancies and the people on leave on students and staffing, and how we're able to meet the needs of students?
It all depends on what kind of leave the person has. We have long-term subs. Every school has a long-term sub that's housed in the building. So that's approximately, some schools have 2, like a large school like Gateway. So there are about 80 full-time building subs that are in buildings, and then our ability to garner subs as well. We have a large pool of subs, but many of those subs are also making decisions not to, they don't mind working virtually at this point in time. In person, they have some challenges around. So I would say that overall, the total number of vacancies would be somewhere around 150, about 150, with about half of that number being supported by long-term subs.
Okay.
I do have one question. How does the, forget which slide it was, but it had the September, I think, 30th enrollment. How does that compare to year end last year?
I'm sorry, say that one more time, Mr. Lane.
Just enrollment right now compared to last year?
Enrollment would be approximately what we project. We projected about 21,000 students for enrollment, and that number is down about 700. About 700, with the bulk of that number 500 to 600 being Went too far.
Yeah. Oh, the other way. Yeah.
Right here, yes, sir. It's the elementary level that we find the greatest decline. So it's about 600 to 700 off based on what we projected. And so if you're asking year over year, this time last year,
Just end of year last year, just comparing it to last year. I just
I can
don't
get
know
you
what
that
that
number.
number was.
I don't have it off the top of my head. I think the number was about 20.
Is it 21?
800, I'm sorry. Yeah, about 20,800, but I can get it for you. So what you want is the number at the end of last school year?
I just needed the ballpark. That's fine for me.
Okay,
I
all right.
just didn't remember what it was off the top of my head.
Okay.
Dr. Adams,
Yes, ma'am.
how did you make the determination on how many families left the state?
Well, we do have that data. When we try to check to find where a family is, our counselors and social workers, nurses, family community specialists try to obtain that information so that we can code it in our system. I can get you an actual number of how many kids left to go to charters, how many kids left left the city to go to the county, and how many kids left to go to other states. We do collect that information. I just don't have it as a part of this report, but we do have that information.
In the future, would we consider trying to survey those people to find out what, the reasons were? Because the city in general, since we're under gentrification, it's important to the school district to understand what people are thinking when they leave.
We do get some anecdotal information, meaning that the counselors or social workers put in why a family may have left. I can pull that report and get that information to you as of this particular year. We do collect that information and we do look at it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll make a note of that, Ms. Fenoy. I just want to make a note of that to make sure I get it back to them. Okay.
For the technology, is the number that's in the not distributed column, is that surplus, extra materials that we have? Or
Yep.
are those students who have not yet received a device?
It's a little combination of both. It's surplus. We ordered more than obviously we wanted. We needed. We knew we would have breakages and those kinds of things. But at this point in time, we have extra laptops. We have extra iPads. We don't have extra hotspots at this point in time.
Do we know how many students are still without a device?
The 912 who have not turned in equipment, that group. I don't know off the top of my head how many that don't have any equipment. About 18%. But didn't we order more iPads and laptops? Okay, but I'm saying that the question is, and I understand the question, the 13106 does not represent, it represents all technology. We only have about 1,100 elementary students in middle school. So if that is the case, then I think I understand the question. Let me come back to you with that.
Sure, that's fine.
What you're
Thank
looking
you.
for.
I'm sorry.
You want to basically know what the difference is of kids who have not picked up the equipment, not necessarily those who can't pick it up because they have not lost it, and what the overages might be.
So my question is, how many students do we have enrolled in our district that do not have technology or to access learning?
For whatever reason, even if they have lost the technology and are not getting new technology and are working on instructional packets.
It'd be, I think a breakdown would be nice so we can see like total number of students who have not yet received technology, and then of those numbers, the number of students who it's because of loss and not.
So if I understand, I want to repeat it so I'm clear. You want to know the number of excess technology we have, the number of students who have not picked up technology, and the number of students who have not picked up technology because they did not return technology.
Yeah, that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, we got it.
Dr. Adams, just a follow-up on Dorothy's question. And I'm going back to a meeting where we said we had one-to-one technology. So is that lining up with the question that was just posed?
Yes, ma'am. We have enough technology to give to every single student. As I said before, we don't give technology out again to kids who have not returned their technology and the other group of students who have not picked up technology. It doesn't mean that it's not available. Students have not picked it up. We've not been able to connect with students such that they can pick it up.
Okay, that response is different from saying we have one-to-one technology. So thank you for that clarity.
Dr. Adams, I have another question in regards to hotspots. I don't know how much it costs, the total cost is to provide hotspots to our students, but is there some other type of technology or something that we could utilize in the areas that are hardest hit that, we have more students located that we can kind of centralize a large hotspot or some type of, I'm not sure how to phrase it, where we could service more students during the school hours. You would turn it on and then turn it off after school hours are over, or?
So I know we did look at some technology like that, Mrs. Vanoy. You want to address that? We did look at that over the summer. It would have to go on one of our buildings, but we did look at that as an option. I'll let Ms. Vanoy address that.
I think you're talking about a mesh where an entire area is covered from a Wi-Fi standpoint. That's something that the city and the district has talked about before, but it's not available at this point. What we did find out is that some of the housing areas are providing free Wi-Fi to their residents. Like what's the one, Peabody, is providing the entire complex with their own Wi-Fi. So if we can work through partnerships with other subdivisions or other entities like that, that would certainly help that. But at this point, we do not have a mesh environment. E-rate does not allow that at this point for us to assist at home. It's only to assist in any of our buildings.
And just for the record, we have been in multiple conversations with the business community as well as the city to try to do exactly what you're talking about. They indicated it's very difficult to do RFPs and leveraging. So we've had multiple conversations with them, and there's some energy in that space, but it has not resulted in any changes right now relative to the measures that she's talking about. I'll move to the second presentation at this point in time, Ms. Vanoy. I want to spend some time with the board talking about the restart and what we are looking to do in that space. The agenda is really to talk a little bit about the instructional support centers. The instructional support centers end tomorrow. They were scheduled to end already after the end of the first quarter. We said we would come back with a recommendation for the second quarter. And this is the recommendation at this point in time to the board. And then I want to talk a little bit about our restart update in terms of what we're looking to do for the second quarter. In review, and this is an important piece that I'd like the board to understand, at the elementary level, the numbers in red are the numbers of families who committed to come to the instructional support centers. You can see that about 970 students out of 1529 at the elementary level indicated they will be coming. The ones in red said, I'm coming. The ones in blue are the ones that actually showed up. In middle school, 405 indicated that they were coming. About 30% actually showed up, which is about 145. At the high school level, which we knew would be the most challenging level because students have options, 187 said they were showing up. There were some students who came from other schools that we see with 0, but they didn't stay. The numbers were really, really small. They stayed. Example, at Vashon, the numbers said 26, but it was only about 5 or 6. At Carnahan, it was only about 10 or 12, and we moved those students to Sodan, and some of them are still going to Sodan at this point in time. But the bottom line is the numbers were not equal to what the commitment was. And I want you to keep that in mind as we look at the possible recommendation for restart. The numbers in black are what we were talking about in the August meeting. The numbers in red, blue, are what actually happened. There was one director that was managing it, the virtual learning associates. We anticipated 250. We hired about 190 of those persons. Obviously, we had less sites and less students. coordinators, instruction support centers. We had 24. We wind up having 21 sites because we closed some sites, as you can see on the former page. Transportation is exactly what we anticipated, 31 special education stops, 130 regular routes, and basically one student per seat. We followed all of those guidelines for the ISCs. For food distribution, there were 18 food distribution sites. We served about 3,000 meals a week. Parents could pick up the food from any food distribution site. That remained the same. There was a pickup on a Monday that still remained the same. And instead of 5-day meal kits, the federal government allowed us to do 7-day meal kits. So families, similar to the summer, can come pick up food on Monday, and that food will last for 7 days. The number of COVID cases, and this was as of me pulling the data as of Thursday or when you received it, 58 cases to date. That's not all around Instructional Support Center. That was cases that persons from the summer, because all staff had to take the assessment. So that was all staff at that point in time, irrespective of the Instructional Support Center, and 3 students. That number is higher today than it was when I sent this report to you. Not much higher, but it is higher because there have been some additional cases. The number of COVID cases alleged to have been contracted at school were 3, and the number of COVID cases at the ISCs were 3. Again, that number is higher today than it was at the time I pulled this. That number is only incrementally higher, not much higher. And so those are the numbers at that time from the Instructional Support Center. In terms of attendance, you can see that we started with about 947 students. We had a high of about 1,050 students, and over the last 3 weeks, 949, 946, and 878. Today, the numbers were 849. Yesterday's numbers were 751, as families are knowing that the Instructional Support Centers are going to close, and as they get prepared for the possibility of schools reopening on Monday. And so this is basically showing what the attendance was on a daily basis at the Instructional Support Centers. The elementary numbers were consistent. The middle and high school numbers declined on a regular basis. So the numbers are much more smaller at the middle and the high school and much larger at the elementary, or consistent at the elementary level. Restart update. We started surveying families or had staff. We did not do a survey because we've done 2 surveys already, so we did not do a survey for our elementary students. We called and got information from them. The rosters were provided to teachers and principals. Phone calls made to each family to indicate their preference for virtual or remaining or returning to brick and mortar in person. That started around started about a week and a half ago. You can see what the numbers are. 5,921 total responses, about 3,721 said they want to come back to in-person, and about 90, which represents about 62%. If you look at the grade level numbers, pre-K through second, you can see what the percentages are. And I'll show you on the next page what the ranges were. And I know this is difficult for the public to see, but obviously you have it before you. We have a high of 83 and a low of, I think, 34 in terms of families that said they will come back to in-person. Our restart update will look like all staff and students must wear masks, maintain a distance of 6 feet, and students will remain in cohorts as much as possible. Limited classroom enrollment, approximately 8 to 10, 8 to 12 students is the number that we're looking at. The class size might dictate something a little bit larger. Hand sanitizer stations in schools as needed. Daily temperature checks, routine disinfected, high touch point areas. If you looked at your transaction report from early in our closed session, if you take a look at it, you'll see that we've hired a large number of custodial staff. That was a priority for us in preparation for coming back on the 19th. Electrostatic sprayers, foggers, and sponge applicators for fast disinfectant. And facility team will coordinate, schedule, and deep clean any classroom, office, or common areas suspected of contamination. Some of that has taken place as late as last week and this week. In addition to that, we are closing buildings, as I said, after tomorrow to make sure that all of our elementary schools are deep clean in preparation for the 19th. In my last meeting, I talked about Merrimack being a model of starting what looks like in-person instruction. They started last Monday, not this Monday. They're into day 8. And you can see what the data is indicating here. About 61 of the 119 students said they were coming back. In actuality, about 48 have shown up. The average student still learning online is still about 71. So there's still more students learning online than are in place. You can see what the classroom numbers are. We've had some lessons learned in terms of the related arts teachers and how to use those in the smart boards. We've also aligned the alignment of our in-person and virtual learning schedules. Is challenging, but it is important. It can be worked out. Flexibility for our staff to support at-home learning is critical, and establishing routines and expectations for independent work is even more critical than ever before. Otherwise, things become even more overwhelming for teachers. So what we're trying to do is to nuance the notion of kids being independent at home, but also doing work in the classroom. You can see kind of the notion of the related arts was an important piece as well, and using all of our support staff was critical at Merrimack as they look to support some 61 students with 48 actually showing up. So the lessons learned have been beneficial. Principals and teachers have gone over to look at Merrimack to see how it was working and have been pleased with what they're seeing at this point in time. So our model right now, threefold: hybrid instruction, which looks like some teachers teaching online as well as teaching students in front of them. In-person instruction, 100% of the students in class getting the teacher in front of them, and the continuation of virtual classrooms. As I said to you at the last meeting, some of this is going to be nuanced based upon the number of families that are coming back, and we have been able to nuance a lot of that as schools have individually made decisions. The district has laid out an overall plan and given schools the flexibility to support their school environment based upon the number of students coming back, the skill set of teachers, and the amount of equipment that we might have at a particular school. Although we have purchased some 500 cameras such that we could support teachers having a camera in front of them as kids still might be virtual. The school dismissal is 1 hour early. Why is that, Dr. Adams? Number one, as students are dropped off, students can no longer congregate in central areas. They have to get off the bus and go straight to their classrooms. So we've asked teachers to come back 15 minutes earlier than they normally would sign in. Teachers were already required to sign in 15 minutes early as a part of their planning. We've asked them to come 15 more minutes early, so they arrive 30 minutes before kids' start time. That allows teachers to be in the classroom, so when kids are dropped off, they go straight to their classrooms. They're not congregating in any common areas. Also, it will be possible that we will have teachers staying with students, eating in the classroom. So if teachers are eating in the classroom, we are pushing their lunch, their uninterrupted lunch, to the end of the day. When we're able to accommodate lunch for them by support staff supporting them, then they will get the lunch period. But if they can't, the lunch is pushed back to the end of the day. And as a result of the two things I just indicated, we are dismissing school 1 hour early every single day. That allows teachers to have their time back and staff to have their time back, in addition to give our custodians an opportunity to start the cleaning that they need to do in preparation for the next day. AB schedules, the following schools, and I'm missing Mason here: Gateway, Dewey, Sticks, Wilkerson, and Mason. Because of the large number of families that wanted to come back, we are not able to accommodate students every single day. So we have an AABB schedule for students, which means that they'll come on Monday and Tuesday, they'll do virtual on Wednesday, and they'll do virtual Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday and Friday. The families that were in the ISCs had an expectation that they will be in school 5 days a week. On Monday, I reached out to all of the ISC principals. We reached out to all of the families and gave them the option to come Monday through Friday every single day. And so all of that has been worked out. There are approximately 300 families that we reached out, more than 300, we reached out to, but 300 that said, yes, thank you for the opportunity. At those 5 schools only, because those schools were also ISC centers and ISC sites. So those families have been reached out to, and those kids will go every single day, with the idea that our support staff will support them similar to what they were doing before when they were in the virtual environment, with support staff supporting them in isolation, not necessarily with a teacher before them, but a support staff supporting them similar to what they would be doing in the ISCs. And so we've been able to work all of those details out. In addition to that, for these sites and other sites that might have any challenge around kids not having somewhere to go if they're getting out an hour early, we will be leveraging our support staff on an individual school basis to allow them to work with those families to extend the school day virtually for those families and kids until parents are able to pick them up. So we've worked out the nuances around that. Every school does not need that. Some of our after-school providers like YMCA and others will continue to do what they did in terms of extending the day to 5 and 6 o'clock, but that's on a school-by-school basis. All of our schools are not taking part in that, but we are doing that on a school-by-school basis. Breakfast in the classroom, students will not eat breakfast in the cafeteria. They'll pick up their lunches and breakfasts, quite frankly, and come to the classroom, and that's what they'll eat, and that's why we have to have staff available in the breakfast in the morning as well as for lunch. There will be obviously limited recess breaks. Will students have recess? Yes, they will, but it will be limited. Students will remain in a pod. They'll be isolated from all of their classmates. They'll be with a group of kids that they're normally with on a regular basis. In terms of middle school and high school, so if this is to impact elementary school starting on the 19th, it should be noted that pre-K through 2 starts on the 19th and 3 through 6 starts on the 26th. That is our plan at this point in time. We're monitoring data on a regular basis. Some of this might change depending upon what we get. At the middle school level, we're looking at the possibility of a November start date for middle school. That would likely be right around the time that the election takes place. November the 4th is the tentative date that we might be looking at. At the high school level, the possibility of students going back, it says November, December, or January at this point in time. It is possible that we're looking at the last week in November to give kids an opportunity to come back to get prepared for their core exams in preparation for them coming back full-time in January. So there may be some soft, very soft entry into buildings by high school students starting as early as late November. As we do it, possibly 9th graders might come back, 10th graders might come back 1 week, but we want to do it in a very soft way to support kids, to give them an opportunity to come back together, obviously in preparation for what we believe might be a full-time enrollment starting in January. The athletic program has been allowed to go on by the health department of the city. The winter sports that normally are winter sports are wrestling, which we're canceling. Obviously, the close contact with wrestling, we do not want to have any of that take place. We're practicing. Basketball, male and female basketball can go on. We are debating or working with our principals right now to determine if basketball practice can either start if kids are not in place. So it's likely that it won't start until we actually get kids back in-person instruction. The last thing is what we received on Friday. The state has been able to secure from the federal government, it seems, over 1.8 million antigen tests, and they're allowing districts to have those antigen tests to test staff and students who might be viewed as being symptomatic. We're putting a plan together. On Monday, we requested that we have some of those tests in preparation for coming back to school, but they're testing kits that can only be dispensed by the nurse or medical personnel, and it's for students or teachers or staff that might be viewed as being symptomatic. It's a minimal invasive nasal swab test, and it must be, as I said before, administered by a healthcare professional. This is only preliminary information. A seminar, a webinar occurred on Friday, and so we are still getting information, and we'll have made a request for some of those tests. Obviously, we'll come back to the board when we get more information, but at this point in time, we think it is prudent and to our benefit to take advantage of the possibility of those tests. I know I covered a lot for the board. Some of this that we've discussed before, and some of it may be new to the board and the public as well, but we have been talking about this for the last month or so in terms of the possibility at the end of the first quarter of students possibly coming back. At this point in time, I'll take any questions or comments that the board might have.
I have a question, Dr. Adams.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm looking at the restart date, I believe it's page 8. update, sorry. And I'm wondering about recess and the playground equipment. I want to know, are our janitorial staff, will they be cleaning in between the times? If the students, if they have recess, are they going to clean in between those times? What would that look like? And then also, will all of our schools be equipped with the school nurse, every school that is open? Yeah, for now.
All of our middle school, all of our elementary schools will have a full-time nurse,
Okay,
full-time social worker, or full-time counselor, starting on the 19th. Since we don't have all of our schools open, if there were any vacancies at the elementary level, we're leveraging nurses and that support staff from middle and high schools to support them. We have attempted to hire a nurse in every single building. Some of those nurses are contracted, some nurses retired. And so I think we might be 5 to 7 nurses district-wide shortage at this point in time, but all of the elementary sites will have nurses. As a matter of fact, I think they start in those buildings tomorrow or Thursday.
okay, and but the playgrounds?
Playgrounds, we have not determined if we're going to allow kids to use playgrounds.
Okay.
They may be cornered off. We're waiting for some direction from the health department on that.
But if we decide to, then you guys will submit a plan that shows what that would look like for our students.
I would suspect there will be minimal usage of playgrounds at this point in time, based on what I understand. But yes, ma'am, we will.
But somebody will clean them though, I mean, like.
Yes, ma'am, on a regular basis, if they're allowed to be used.
Okay, and my last question, let's see here. Yeah, was on, you answered the stuff about the nasopharyngeal swab. So the ETA on that is supposed to be what date, please?
October 26th is when they indicate that they should be arriving. Those tests should be shipped sometimes around October 26th. We put a formal request in on Monday. It is my understanding that shipping won't take place until the 26th.
So if we're utilizing the nurses from the middle schools right now, when they do open up, what would that look like for the students in schools that are already open?
At this point in time, we obviously are going to continue to try to hire enough nurses for every building. But at this point in time, we're about 5 to 7 nurses short. So we will have to do some kind of nuances around that piece.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Adams, I have a few questions as well. One point of clarification, when you talked about surveying people about coming back to schools, did you say you did not survey the teachers, or did you just survey the parents?
We did 2 surveys with parents. We did 0 surveys with staff.
You did 0 surveys
That
for
is
the
correct.
staff? Okay.
We did send out 3 weeks ago for staff to give us their feedback. We got some 972 comments from staff, and we did a similar piece with parents to get their feedback as well. It wasn't a technical survey. It was giving you feedback. It wasn't, do you want to come back? Do you not want to come back? It was basically, what would it take for you to feel comfortable coming back? Those kind of questions. We could send you a copy of what we sent out.
Okay, great, thank you. Then also I just have a few questions. For schools that have a much higher percent of students returning, will we add more staff, teachers in particular, to keep classrooms to 10 to 12 students?
That is why we went to the AB schedule for those 5 schools.
Okay, so it's those 5 schools.
Yes,
Okay.
just those 5 schools, because they are taking half the kids on a Monday or Tuesday and half the kids on Wednesday and Thursday. So that's why those very large elementary schools did do an AB schedule, because to your point, they could not accommodate all of the kids coming back without a 10 to 1 or 12 to 1 ratio. So that is why we kind of cut this number in half. Some come half and some come the other half.
So all the other schools that won't be on the AB schedule will have 10 to 12 students per classroom?
That is correct.
Okay, very good.
There may be some opportunities for a larger environment like this environment, where they might be 15 kids, when the environment is large enough to accommodate that.
Okay, very good. Then for those, say teachers go back and an educator ends up getting COVID and who's back in person, what is the plan for that classroom if that teacher has to leave the classroom because they've contracted?
First of all, from a teacher perspective, the teacher is covered by the CARES Act, and so they will be taken care of through the HR department for that. From a student perspective, we have several options. Option 1, we could close the class down. The details of that determines a great deal about if kids were exposed to it, because we may have to quarantine kids,
Yeah.
as we've done already in one of our ISC sites. So that classroom might be closed down and kids then will revert to virtual, and another teacher will pick up teaching those kids virtually. So we may have to tell those kids for the next 10 weeks, you're virtual. You have to stay at home and we'll provide the virtual. The other piece might be, if there's enough staff, a substitute may support those kids in the in-person environment while that's taking place. So it's gonna really depend upon a number of factors. We are hiring 2 contact tracers and I've leveraged 2 other administrators right now to act in that role, but they'll be investigating those kinds of issues and then making recommendations about what we need to do, which we've done, quite frankly, successfully over the last 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, and then in one of the slides, I think is that one actually, it says that you guys are gonna try to keep the students 6 feet as much as possible. Now, only thing I want to say is that, you know, we need to make that an absolute versus just possible. So I encourage the schools, the administrators, the principals to ensure that these students and staff are 6 feet apart.
The challenge, Ms. Fowler, is the challenge of ECE, early childhood. Some of the smaller kids, while they respect the 6 feet, it's not going to be impossible for 100% of the time to keep them that way. And our special needs population as well. Some of them have very specific needs. What we are providing for our staff is additional PPE equipment, i.e. masks, as well as a face shield, i.e. gloves, i.e. covers, to make sure that we're protecting them. But in some environments, it's going to be impossible to keep them 100% 6 feet just because of the challenges with certain populations, special populations. And that is the reason why that leverage is provided there.
Okay. And then just 2 more things. One, I want to just say to the parents and the teachers who are listening, you know, we do receive your emails and we do listen to them and we do try to make sure that we acknowledge your questions. And Dr. Adams also makes sure that he acknowledges your questions and include all of those thoughts in his plan. So we would want all of you guys who are looking to know that's the case. But my last thing is, one of the reasons I asked the CFO about, can we use the CARES money for things like Wi-Fi and reaching, you know, to expand the Wi-Fi reach in the schools, is that if it comes to a point where we see our cases rising up, but we still need people in the schools, I would recommend that we spend some of the dollars on plexiglass for teachers, you know, expanding our Wi-Fi and start researching that now so that we can still have in-class, we can still have students come to school, but teachers still teach virtually. And I know you responded to my question that right now the bandwidth isn't there. Maybe we should start researching how do we increase that bandwidth per school and use the PPE dollars, the CARES dollars to do that. I just want us to stay ahead of the game versus, you know, trying to catch up on everything. And if we can reallocate some of those dollars in case there is a challenge and parents still need their kids at school, we can focus our attention early on those kind of solutions versus reacting to those solutions. Thank you.
We have purchased plexiglass for all of our secretaries' desks. We did that over the summer. The classroom is a little bit different, the kind of dynamic, because teachers are not stable. They're moving constantly to kind of support kids. We did kind of talk about that based on your email today to look at what that might look like. The second piece is in terms of the internet broadband. Mrs. Van Noy and I had this conversation about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We will be putting out an RFP over the next 60 days. We're really trying to wait to see what the E-rate says, because this is a very expensive process, as you might can imagine. And we want to make sure that we try to use the federal dollars if we can to do that. If we can make it through February, we think the E-rate funding will be available at that time, and we would only pay 10% as opposed to 10% of, let's say, $5 million or whatever the case might be. So we did start this conversation. We are looking at what needs to be done in that space. Don't know that we can do it prior to the beginning of, prior to December, but we are looking to see what we can do to get in that space such that we are ready when the E-rate funding comes to actually get this stuff up and running. Because we did kind of price what it might be to look to do this.
Very good. And I know I suggested in an email that we contact Regis, which is a city organization, and they help us through this process. I'm sure you are familiar with their executive director, so you guys should work something out there, okay?
Gotcha.
Yes, Dr. Adams.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is in regards to water fountains in the building. There are just so many, and you have just so many students. How are you going to keep, or how will the staff keep the children safe when it's time for them to have the water breaks, or when they go to the restroom and they're using the facilities? I know they're going to stay in pods, but how do you keep them safe during that time when they're going to get the drink water and when they're going to the restrooms? And young students aren't really the best people when they're going to the restroom. I don't think they look behind themselves sometimes.
So for the ISCs over the last 7 weeks, we've not had that issue. We've had custodians, 4 custodians in every elementary building wiping down the water fountain. Students, quite frankly, at the elementary level, like the dots on the ground, and so they stay 6 feet away. So 1 student using the restroom at a time. We've not had an issue with that in any of our elementary schools in terms of water fountains or using the restroom. It just has not been an issue. And this was with our support staff, not necessarily principals managing these. And so we don't anticipate having a large problem with the restrooms or wiping down water fountains. We've just not had an issue. Now, mind you, the numbers have been small numbers. Some of our sites have had as few as 20. The highest numbers have been about 80 to 90 at Mason and at Sticks. But we've not had an issue, Ms. Jones, with wiping down water fountains and cleaning the bathrooms on a regular basis. Staff is actually doing it on a rotating basis, that they have to do it 3 or 4 times in an hour to make sure things are wiped down. But we've not had any issues with those kind of issues at this point in time.
Okay, so the students learn that there's a procedure when they go to the restroom, that they're washing their hands when they go in and when they come out as well?
Yes, ma'am, they are.
Okay.
We've just not had that issue at all at the elementary sites. That's why we did the ISCs. We haven't had that issue at Merrimack either. Those 2 things have not been an issue for us at this point in time.
And so the students are bringing in their own water, or are they utilizing the water fountain?
They're using the water fountains, but the water fountains are wiped on a regular basis.
Okay. I did have.
But we have discussed the idea of having bottled water in some cases. So we haven't landed that at a place yet. We'll see what happens as we go back. But we did not have this issue at all in any of our ISC sites.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe Natalie has a question.
Yes. You want to turn it on?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So I really appreciate all the sacrifices and accommodations our teachers are making, especially if we're asking them to push back their lunches and eat in the classroom with their students, which I'm not sure I would be comfortable with. But are we sure this is all entirely voluntary and that all of them are comfortable with this level of risk? I mean, I don't feel like we've adequately accounted for their needs. We haven't done a survey. I mean, our students are obviously the center of our mission, but if we don't support our staff, I don't think we can adequately support our students. So is there any way we can plan for some sort of formal survey, even if it's a short turnaround time, so that we can adequately engage the needs of our staff?
As I indicated before, we did get the opinions of staff. Some 900 staff did respond to us. At this late date, I would not want to do a survey. If the board requires a survey, obviously I'll do one. But I did get feedback from 900 staff persons. I can send that information to you. We have worked closely with Local 420 and had detailed conversations with Mr. Cummings, and they have not necessarily agreed. They sent out something on last Friday, based on everything I just said. About 90% of the elementary teachers right now are indicating they feel comfortable coming back based on what we are saying. But if the board requires a survey, I will do a survey.
Dr. Adams, I have a question.
Hold on, Don, just one. I just want to make sure that,
Oh.
Natalie,
Oh, sorry.
It's just always a little weird when someone's not here. I just want to make sure. But did that answer your question, Natalie?
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, what are we doing about, I mean, we have a lot of staff out on FMLA, but what are we doing about the people who don't qualify for that? Are we making any extra accommodations beyond what we are required to by law?
At this point in time, the CARES Act is very clear, and the Human Resources Department has been meeting with persons who indicated that they have a comorbidity issue, or they have family members that might have some kind of issue. And we've had one-on-one interactive conversations with each one of those persons. To the degree that we can legally accommodate them, we will. To the degree that we cannot, we allow those persons to go on leaves. But we are, when you're saying taking an extraordinary step, we are following what the law says at this point in time and are trying to be as supportive as possible. Don't know that we are doing anything outside of that that would be considered to be extraordinary. We are following the law, the letter of the law in terms of trying to support staff and trying to give as much flexibility as possible, but at the same time, make sure that we have the appropriate staff to support our classrooms.
Okay, and just the last thing, I would like to see, and I mean, obviously, I would want to talk to the other board members about this, but I would like to see some sort of survey, at least maybe mid-semester or at the end of the school year, so that we can see how our staff felt supported. We are always talking about teacher retention and vacancies, and I feel like if we are not listening to them, we're not doing our job to serve our students, essentially, because we have to serve them through our teachers. So I don't know if that's a possibility, but just something to consider. I feel like that would really help me make better decisions. I'm currently uncomfortable with being there in person myself, so I can definitely understand any concerns that teachers may have as well. So any information on that would be awesome.
So I apologize. I thought you meant a survey before the end of the week.
That would be ideal, or when.
Board, and we will be serving parents, students, and staff moving forward, similar to what we did last year with Panorama. And some of the questions will be geared toward the COVID response and how they felt about the response and support from the staff. So yes, we will be doing a survey. A Panorama survey is the data that we will be collecting twice this year. Once should be happening either right before Christmas or right after Christmas, and once again in March or April. So yes, ma'am, you will have data from the Panoramic survey that outlines how staff, students, and parents felt this school year. So yes, ma'am, I apologize. I thought you meant a survey over the next 2 or 3 days, but yes, we are planning a survey for those 3 entities, and there will be 2 surveys that are done this year for them. Last year, we were not able to complete the one in March because of the virus.
No, I did actually mean a survey sooner, but this is, I guess, the next best thing because it will guide our decisions going forward. We're setting a ton of precedents right now. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate your continued attention to all the data that those things bring. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Done.
Yes, Dr. Adams, earlier you talked about the procedure for the teachers if you found that they had, teachers or staff members, if they had COVID. So once that's determined, do they have to have another test for reentry back into the schools? And if they do, and then the students that are being sent home or they're being quarantined for 10 days, do they have to be tested as well, or do they just come back in?
So we have not been requiring a test for students when we quarantine. I think it's 14 days, not 10 days, but 14 days they have to be away from the site. And staff have been, if I am correct, and could be corrected by Mrs. St. Alma, we do ask the staff to come back with a negative result prior to coming back to work. We don't, okay, 14 days again? Yes, so staff and students, 14 days.
Which is per the CDC and the doctor and Mr. Eccles of the health department.
Right, 14 days, so we don't require a second test, but 14 days before they can return back to work.
So are all the staff and teachers now considered essential workers because we receive the CARES funds?
The answer is yes.
Educational employees were actually considered essential workers from the beginning of the pandemic. They were exempted from the stay-at-home orders in March, actually.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Adams, I certainly appreciate the planning options that you've given parents who use the ISC centers and those who continue to use the virtual option. My question goes to those parents who are still interested in the ISC option, and you indicated that there would be 5 schools to support those families?
So the ISC sites at this point in time, so let me back up a little bit. Obviously, we had multiple ISC sites. The elementary ISC sites that were not large sites, Mason, Dewey, Sticks, Wilkinson, and Gateway, all other sites are offering 5 days a week instruction. So if you were in one of the ISC sites that wasn't one of the 5 I said, you simply go to in-person instruction because you're back in school 5 days a week. The sites that were the concerns were the sites that were only offering AB, which was 2 days a week of instruction. And for those families that were in ISC sites, those 5, we have given them the opportunity for 5 days of instruction, or 5 days of support within the same building that, within one of those 5 buildings that I just indicated. So every single family in the ISC site will have the ability to have 5 days of instruction or instructional support as they had when they were in the ISCs.
At the 5 centers you just identified?
And every single site. So I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If Dunbar was an ISC site, Dunbar is now going to offer 5 days a week of instruction. So there's no need to do anything other than come for in-person instruction because it's been converted from an ISC site to regular in-person instruction.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple of questions. The first one on slide 6, you don't have to go back to it, but on slide 6, you gave information on positive COVID results at the ISCs. My question and the purpose of the question is, well, ultimate question, is there going to be like a COVID dashboard or a page on the site that's going to be constantly updated with data similar to, but probably not as extensive as the city of St. Louis County, giving updates and on what regular basis? And then in addition to that question, looking into the past, that data that we saw, was that data that was provided regularly to families in a public way so that they could also see how many cases are at the ISCs?
It is our intent when we get back to in-person to have the data available on our websites. Similar to what some other districts are doing. We looked at Kirkwood, we looked at Webster Grove. They're posting this on their website. I met with Mrs. Pierce and Mrs. Willis. It is our intent that when school starts on the 19th, this data will be on our website. We do keep the data in human resources at this point in time. So we do have a data dashboard that's very specific to the actual employee. Obviously, we can't post that, but the numbers we will be posting on the 19th. Yes, sir. We will have a dashboard available.
Thank you. The second question is around a second and third thing around teaching. So you said there are going to be basically 3 types of teachers. So the blended model or
Yes.
the blended teacher, virtual and in person. First, I guess, quick question, the teacher that's virtual only, will they be required to be in the building?
They will not.
They will not, okay. Secondly, so for the blended, obviously they're in the building and the in-person are also in the building. We had a day in the life of the teacher back when we thought we were going back to in-person with limited virtual. Is it possible to be provided with something similar from academics?
Yes,
to see
quite
what
frank-
that looks like, and so teachers know what that looks like as well.
Yes, we can. Quite frankly, we have done that. We provided it to the network superintendents last Wednesday, Thursday, to get their feedback. Dr. Mitchell, who you saw present here, I can have her turn around something and have it available as well. But we have created one. We just have not shared it with teachers. We can do that. Yes.
Okay. All right, I have two more. I did ask this back. Back in our work session. I don't know if there's an update to this, but when it comes to, I said mid-quarter enrollment, but really students can enroll or switch districts or transfer all the time. What is our approach to that, given moving into Q2 and then looking at high school for late November?
We are going to be requiring all new students who are coming in to be 100% virtual initially.
Okay. And then the last thing is a recommendation / comment. From my experience, when I started in the district as a 22-year-old, it was hard for me because of poor planning to go an entire day without eating. So asking teachers to do that and pushing that lunch to the end of the day, I think definitely needs to be reevaluated. I know that you said there is this in-classroom option, but I think we also have to understand we're asking teachers to come in an hour earlier or just be there earlier in general. And a lot of these teachers have their own children. So I think this goes back to Natalie's point about the survey, just checking that feasibility for teachers to be able to do this. So I don't know if every teacher is able to show up an hour early to make sure that students eat breakfast in the classroom. And based on age, based on health restrictions and complications, there might not be teachers, or not all teachers are going to be able to wait until 1, 2 o'clock to have a meal. So it's not my job to plan it, but whoever's job it is, I think it would be great to look at that, to be able to either survey teachers and see what makes sense. Maybe they have some ideas, or if we're not going to survey, which I think we should, if we're not going to do that, think of a plan that still allows them to eat. I don't know if that's using additional building staff. I don't know if that's using, and I know we didn't have a lot of them, but ISC staff to go into classrooms. So this way, at least students aren't moving, but one responsible adult is in there so that teachers can eat.
Yes, sir. Just a little clarity. Teachers are going to be coming 15 minutes early, not an hour early. They're only coming 15 minutes earlier than they normally will come. In terms of the lunch, you are correct, and I've asked principals as late as Friday. The intent is that teachers still get their 30-minute lunch. We're going to dismiss an hour early because of the reasons I indicated. The intent is that teachers still get their 30-minute lunch. This is a emergency kind of situation if we need to have a teacher eat with kids, but it's not the intent on a regular basis that this happens every single day. We want to have the ability to have teachers available if we need to, but we are working right now for a plan for teachers to still have lunch and have a duty-free lunch. And so I can give you some updates after next week. As I indicated to you, based on the ISC numbers, we don't believe that all of the commitments made are going to actually come. After the first 5 days, if children have not shown up, they will lose their slot for in-person and remain virtual. And so we believe the numbers are going to be smaller and therefore give us the flexibility such that teachers could still have the 30 minutes uninterrupted lunch. It's not something I'm willing to take away from teachers. I just realized that in order to safeguard kids staying in a pod, we need to have adults with them. And the only adult I can guarantee right now is a teacher. We are looking at ISC people and other persons, even from central office, going into support such that teachers could have the 30-minute lunch. But this is, we want to see how this works the first 3 or 4 or 5 days, and we'll make some adjustments from there, Mr. Lane, to kind of let you know on the board how that's working out.
Yeah, I had one more, but I don't see it on my sheet, so I think that's it.
So I appreciate all the autonomy that you have provided to the different schools so that they are able to meet the unique needs of their student population and the needs of their families, and allowing families to have a choice to choose the modality that makes the most sense and works best for their family. And so I know that a lot of these plans were based on kind of reactive to choices that families were making. And so it was kind of gathering that input from families and then saying, working at the school level to create a plan so we could meet the needs of the families. So now that those plans have been created, how are you looking to kind of get some of this detail out to individual families at those schools so they know exactly what school will look like, and kind of thinking about what Adam said about a day in the life. So teachers have that information, but also families as well. And it is likely that different schools are going to be doing different things. So how will we communicate that out from the buildings?
So there are three ways. Number one, a transportation letter went out last week that provides information about where children will be picked up, but also some of that information. There have been 3 mailings that went out on Thursday, Friday, and Monday to parents by email. They're called, I can't think of the name of it, but welcome back to quarter 2. Those emails went out to every single family that we have an email address for. After this meeting, a FAQ is going out on the website. Mrs. Pierce is working on it as we speak. I asked her to wait until after the meeting tonight. She is monitoring the meeting and will be sending out an FAQ. School sites also have a restart plan. The restart plan information was gathered. Mrs. Willis is putting all of the individual restart plans on every school's website tomorrow. Again, we were waiting until after this meeting. They finished up on Friday, but it's a restart plan, but it's not the full document, because the full document is about 30 pages. But this is a 1 or 2 page PDF that lays out what this particular school is doing. Lastly, we will be doing a phone notification that will go out on tomorrow and Thursday to outline what's going on. And also the hotline is already open and ready to take calls. Mr. Brown opened back up the hotline on Monday. The family community specialists are taking calls as early as Monday of this week to take any kind of questions that families might have around the nuances of all of this. And the transportation call center is open as well. So those are the ways that we're trying to push out communication. And schools also are having meetings and Zoom meetings and all of those kinds of things to try to get out individual information as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So at this point, we will move into the consent agenda. Is there a motion? The items are 01. Well, first of all, let me ask, are there any items that you all would like to take separately?
Yes.
Okay, so I move that we approve the consent agenda for items 1013-2001 through 1013-2012. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion on these items?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yeah. I can't hear you. Okay. Yes, Natalie?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I did actually have a question on 1013-2009. Are we offering any additional benefits specific to COVID-19 risks and complications like testing and vaccines once a vaccine is available under the, I'm sorry, this was about the group benefits plan for 2021. So I didn't know if any of that would expand based on current conditions or not.
So she's asking about item 1013-2009 and if there are any changes to the health insurance plan specific to COVID-19.
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Bowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones? Yes. Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
So we do have one walk-on item. That item is 1013-2013. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion?
I do have a question, and I believe I understand that these are like portable buildings or something like that.
Yes, ma'am. There are 2 portables at CSMB. Those are labs for the specialty program that they have at CSMB. It was an elementary school that was converted to a high school. And so as a result, they didn't have the lab space. And so we received the information from the contractor late. This is year 4 or 5. We normally get it before the summer, but obviously COVID impacted some of that. That's the reason why it's being asked to be voted on tonight. But it's not something unusual, it's just that it came late.
Thank you.
My question on that, Dr. Adams, are there accessibility provisions within those, forget what they're called, things?
Yes, sir. You're talking like handicap accessible?
Right.
Yes, sir. For those, yes. The complaint last year was the fact that they didn't have an elevator.
Yeah. I just knew for
Yes.
the additional ones.
Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the motion or second on this.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
We didn't get the motion or second on that.
Motion second.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane? Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
So moving into reports of the board, we have about 3 committee reports tonight. So I'll start with Adam Lane first for the Ad Hoc Budget Committee.
Yep. So the Ad Hoc Budget Committee met, was it last Friday? Last Friday for the first of a series of presentations from the Finance Department. It was broadcast and I believe recorded as well. And the purpose of the meeting was for the Ad Hoc Committee to gain more insight into the budget process. The next one is tentatively, we're looking at not this Friday, but the following Friday. Again, this will be open to the public. It'll be posted on the site, and it will be a live session. That's it.
Thank you. Natalie, I believe you have a report from the Governance Committee.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So the governance committee met on September 16th. We held a virtual meeting to discuss, we identified our priorities essentially. So we are going to focus on our internal documents to ensure that we are upholding the best practices of governance. We have 3 committee members at present, myself, Ms. Regina Fowler, and Dr. Joyce Roberts. We will be reviewing the Code of Ethics next, and our next meeting is in planning right now. That's the tentative agenda, but we are waiting on board member responses in order to finalize that meeting date. So I'll take any questions, but there's really not much other than our intro meeting and establishing what our first goals are.
Donna?
The Public School Retirement System will hold a meeting October the 8th, 2020. This will be an investment committee meeting. It will be held at 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, October the 15th. The next meeting will be a regular Board of Trustees regular meeting. It will be held October the 19th, 2020, beginning at 4:30, and it can be accessed through live stream or on YouTube. (2020) renewal review. SLPS conducted an RFP process for all of their employee benefits plans. They renewed with no UHC and Express Scripts RX for 2020 with no major plan design changes. Premium rates change depending on plan enrollment. The premium rates for the UHC Medicare plans stayed the same for 2020, which included the addition of the health insurance tax that was suspended in 2019. No major plans design changes. So this just briefly, some of the things that the public school retirement system have been working on, and I'm encouraging everyone to tune in to the next investment committee meeting to be held this Thursday at 4:30 PM.
Are there any questions from the board as it pertains to the committee reports that you've heard or to the committees in general? So we will move on to a discussion of the proposed Mission and Vision Committee. Regina, I believe you are taking the lead on this.
Thank you. At the last closed session, we talked about establishing a committee, an ad hoc committee, to establish some, what I really like to call guiding principles for the board to help us as we make decisions for the board. And what we want to do is come up with a unified set of guiding principles that we will operate from. I went through the board documents and the bylaws, and many of those still have to be updated. And the vision and mission that are out there are outdated. So we don't have that principle document that guides us as a unified body to help the district and our superintendent, make these major decisions. So I requested that this ad hoc committee be started so that we can, come up with that unified set of guiding principles. Because, next year, early next year, we'll start preparing our 5-year plan, or the district will start doing their 5-year plan. We'll be asked to give our input, make decisions, but as a board right now, we don't have that unifying document that we need to guide our principles, to guide ourselves. Now, this is not a long document, nor is it something that's meant to guide the district itself on what they're going to do. This document is meant to guide us as a board, to help us understand how we come about making decisions on a unified basis. So I sent you guys some documents for your review, and I've asked that this be presented to the board and ultimately be approved, that a committee be established. Once we come up with that and the full board agrees with these guiding principles, I would recommend that the governance committee then take this over to update as needed in the future. So.
Are there questions?
Just to thank you for taking on that effort, and the recommendation that it become a part of the board governance committee is an excellent idea.
You're welcome.
I would second, I second what Dr. Roberts said. Thank you for committing to this. I think it's something that we definitely need. One maybe hypothetical, maybe not hypothetical question I would pose to you is, in looking at the, I guess, board norms and bylaws created or that live within the board governance committee, I guess, if both of these things exist, which one leads, which one takes precedent, would you say?
Well, I think they're going to exist as one, ultimately they will exist as one document. It's just we're doing that subset so that we can get that initial broad statement established so that we can be guided in our continuance of the governance committee, and also it'll serve as guidance to us as we participate in the superintendent's quest to come up with the next 5-year plan. So I don't see them as separate, but I think what it does is takes the burden off the governance committee as they're going through all the details to get this bigger document done earlier so that we can have those set of principles available to us sooner.
So I've spoken about this a lot in the past, but I do think there is significant overlap between the role of the governance committee and what we're proposing here. We do already have some guiding documents, in particular the norms and the code of ethics that do guide the board and their functioning and the way that we make decisions. So I would give some consideration to potentially making this a more explicit goal within the governance committee as opposed to creating a separate committee. However, if the board does approve this as a separate ad hoc committee, I would recommend that it focus very specifically around our governance duties and our relationship in the direction that we provide to the superintendent. And so in addition to coming up with a statement, also generating some board governance goals that are very specific that give the board something to work towards on that end. And then also putting in some research into governance best practices and standards for effective governance. And so there are some actionable items that come out of this as well. I do agree that the mission and the vision for the district is outdated and does need to be refreshed and updated, but that is certainly a task that the board would need to take up in conjunction with all of our stakeholders, families, students, teachers, administrators, and the superintendent and the like. So I think this potentially does duplicate some of our work with the governance committee. But if we do proceed with the creation of this to look really specifically around some goals for governance and how we kind of act towards reaching those goals.
Yeah, I had the conversation with Natalie about the governance committee, and I did not actually see the overlap. As this is a more broad statement, these are guiding principles for us. Even with establishing those tasks on the governance committee, which I am now part of, we need guiding principles as we accomplish those tasks, and we don't have those. As it relates to the district itself and their vision and mission, I don't see this as being their vision and mission. I think their vision and mission is going to be very operationally driven, where this is really, the point of this is really to help us guide us as we have to come and make these decisions that the superintendent brings to us. How do we come to these things? What are our beliefs about what this school district needs, what the city and the school system in the city needs to do? How do we see that? And then that helps us make the decision. So I think that we don't overlap with the district itself and the 5-year plan that's going to be developed coming soon, nor do I see this as being redundant with the governance committee. I think this actually will be established to help the governance committee accomplish the goals that we're set out to accomplish. So.
You go ahead first. I have a question. If this, and thank you all for your hard work on this so far, but I have a question about us creating this document, and if we're saying that this isn't going to overlap within the work of the governance committee, and then it will ultimately end up there, I'm wondering why should it not stay separate if we're ultimately going to go back on whomever is here once it becomes outdated or needs to be revisited and it's in a separate committee? What's the point of merging it?
Well, right now there's a great need that we have some guidance. I think you've heard, at least since I've been on the board, we've heard over and over members saying we don't have this. We don't have a common unified vision, or we don't have common guiding principles. So the reason we do it as an ad hoc committee is so that we don't just push it back and it becomes something that gets delayed and ultimately never happens. So if we have an ad hoc committee that can work through this without stopping the governance committee from doing what some of the things they're supposed to do, we can actually accomplish things a little faster. And why do we hand it over to the governance committee? Because ultimately, as it does need to be reviewed over years so that this won't become outdated, we have a standing committee that is responsible for reviewing it along with all the other things that they review. So with this being an ad hoc committee, we won't exist all the time. So, yeah.
But at some point you will go back and revisit it again, correct?
Yeah, and that's
so there would
where
be no point in getting rid of the ad hoc committee. Perhaps it should stand as a recommendation And if it needs to be, updated, then we would always have that ad hoc committee, as something, or as a place where we go to update our vision and mission as a board.
I mean, that's a choice certainly that can be considered. It was just my recommendation that the governance committee, once we've fulfilled all our other things, then we'll have more time to focus on these guiding principles as well as everything else that needs to be established. What I don't want to do is to go into the hands of the governance committee and we're trying to update bylaws, we're trying to update ethics, we're trying to update all these other things, and then these guiding principles get, delayed. And it's important that we have these because when we start working on the 5-year plan, we're going to need those guiding principles. And I think right now with the governance committee, if we put it in our hands, who's on the governance committee, we're going to end up delaying something that needs to be established before we start the 5-year plan. But if it's the desire of the board to keep the ad hoc committee, I don't have anything against that. It was just a recommendation that I was making.
Is there a motion as it pertains to the creation of this committee?
I move that we move toward the creation of this ad hoc committee. It will take on a task that we've delayed over time. It will give us an opportunity to move a little quicker, and then it will, in my opinion, rest with the board, the governance board, and all the things that Dorothy, you recommended are governance board items.
Second.
Further questions or discussion on the creation of the committee? So one thing, as the committee moves into creating a mission and vision, so thinking of our role as governance, I'm a little concerned with the feeling that exists that we are operating without a guiding principle, because our role as the board is to provide a quality education for all of our students. And that is our number one driving factor in the work that we do for all of this. And I would like to make sure that that stays at the forefront of any discussion that the Mission and Vision Committee has, because outside of that, that's the reason why we are all here, to provide a high quality education for our students. And so that is our one and only guiding principle as we make all of our decisions for the district. And that, I hope, is reflected in the mission and vision that come out of this committee.
And I agree that that will certainly be the top priority.
Further questions or discussion? Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Bowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
We have our draft legislative agenda before us as prepared by our lobbyist, Mr. Steve Carroll. He was here at our work session and made himself available to.
Dorothy, I'm so sorry. Can I interrupt just 1 minute?
Sure.
About this committee. I know some of you guys have mentioned being part of it. Can you please email me for those who I think said they would serve on this? I think
Can you speak up,
Ms.
please?
Susan and Ms.
Can you
Dr.
speak up? I can't hear you.
Oh, yes, sorry. I know a couple of you guys talked about serving on this committee. If you would email and confirm that, I think Ms. Susan and Dr. Roberts had mentioned that. And others were trying to keep it to 3 to no more 4 members. So if you guys would email me or text me, I'd really appreciate it so we could get started right away.
Yeah, I'm going to contribute the documents, but I haven't committed to taking on a position on that committee as of right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have committed or no?
No, I'm going to contribute the documents that I mentioned in the meeting, but as of right now, I haven't committed to a spot on the committee.
Okay, great. So anyone else who'd like to participate, I'd appreciate it. I appreciate you letting me know.
So back to the legislative agenda. This was prepared by our lobbyist. It is largely a carryover from last year, has the vast majority of the items are the same as last year. There were some changes he made to reflect conversations that he had after he made himself available for any further comment after our discussion as a board at the work session. So with that, is there a motion to approve our 2021 legislative platform?
So moved.
Second?
Questions or discussion on the legislative agenda? Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Vowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
There is a kind of, timely, I can't think of the right word. There is a timely matter as it pertains to our legislative agenda. Natalie, are you available to talk about this?
Yeah, I was
For
going to put it in a
Proposition
board
R.
member report, but if you can hear me now, that's perfect.
Natalie, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I was going to just put this in a board member report, but we'll go with it now. Last week, I communicated with our lobbyist, Mr. Steve Carroll, regarding Proposition R and how it fits in with our legislative agenda. I kind of wanted his opinion on this. So he took out some bullet points and compiled a document for me, and I forwarded that to the full board. This proposition is a 1/3 increase in current property tax rates, and that would be going to private entities potentially with no specific mandates for any public oversight. So it does seem to be at direct odds with our stances that are on our legislative agenda, even the one that we had adopted last year and has been long standing. So I asked Mr. Carroll for a short statement for the board to adopt as an official stance on this specific matter. It is coming up on the November ballot. So you all should have received that statement, which I emailed out yesterday from Mr. Carroll. I'm hoping that we can consider this for a vote when we meet next.
Are there questions for Natalie or greater discussion on the statement before you? I'll read it. I know we have people listening at home. The St. Louis Board of and this is a draft. The St. Louis Board of Education is opposed to Proposition R in its current form. While the St. Louis Board of Education strongly supports increased funding for early childhood education, Proposition R is a proposal that would divert taxpayer dollars from public schools to non-public entities. In addition, the language of Proposition R is too vague and does not ensure that the $2.3 million raised from taxpayers would directly benefit children in their early years of education. The board strongly believes the best way to fund early education is to increase funding through the state foundation formula, which supports all public schools. So are there questions for Natalie or greater discussion on this item? Natalie, I believe you said that you were recommending this for a vote at our work session. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, if anyone wants to consider that, I would appreciate that.
Seeing no further discussion on this item, we'll move into board member reports. Suzanne, I'll start with you.
None at this time.
Joyce?
I was in attendance at the Missouri School Board Association, September the 24th through the 26th. And I'll give a brief summary. Sessions 1 and 2 pertain to virtual learning, and the one takeaway was to ensure that the district has a cybersecurity. Are we protected against cybersecurity?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Implicit bias, what schools can do, and they gave several recommendations. Focus on seeing people as individuals, working on consciously changing our stereotypes, take time to pause and reflect, adjust your perspective, increase your exposure, and practice mindfulness. I did participate in the delegate assembly in the pre-meeting or training, and then in the actual delegate assembly, which was focused primarily on the platform for MSBA, increase in the foundation formula, increase in transportation costs, and and waivers in special education during the pandemic. We are part of Region 7, and we are joining forces with Region 4. Patty Poster has taken a job with the Special School District, and Janet Tilley is assuming her duties. And lastly, budget development. Does the budget support the strategic goal? And new members should receive budget information in their orientation or onboarding session. And that concludes my report.
I'm going to go to Natalie so I don't forget.
No, I think
Thank
pretty
you,
much.
Ms. Vanoy.
Can you hear me? That was all.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that was all. I was going to include that legislative thing matter in my board member report, but that's fine. So we're good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Adam, do you have a report?
No report at this time.
Regina?
Yeah, forgive me for that. I was asking Adam what this is for because I wanted to say something. I just want to highlight Dorothy's attentiveness to me as a new board member. And I think we should highlight the great job she's done. I don't think I've ever been integrated into a board so quickly and smoothly than this board. And a lot has to do, the reason for that, I believe, is because of Dorothy and all that you've done. So thank you.
Thank you. That's nice to hear. Donna?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Just briefly, I don't have an official report, but just as always, a big thank you to everyone that's working so hard on getting our students back into the classroom while also maintaining a focus on providing a high quality virtual education. I know this is completely outside the realm of anything anybody anywhere signed up for, and you're all doing a great job, and we appreciate that very much. So keep up all the hard work. Dr. Adams, thank you for everything that you and your team are doing. And good luck with the second first day of school on the 19th. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second. Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Powell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones? Yes. Ms. Rhodey